political violence, and that's something that you running for president inevitably face in some way. It might just be words or it might be physical violence. And so it's a very hard thing to do to actually run for president and put yourself up on a pedestal like that. How has this affected you as a man? So this is a unique interview. I've done dozens of these, but this is the first presidential candidate I'm talking with. So how did you become the American Solidarity Party's presidential nominee for the 2024 election?
Michael, I've been involved with the Solidarity Party for about 6 years. I discovered it in 2018. I've been disenchanted, however, with the American political system for much longer than that. I only discovered the ASP in 2018 after a frustrated vote for another third-party candidate in 2016. My involvement with the party developed over these last 6 years, and as they were looking for nominees, candidates to represent the party and its platform in 2024, I entered the contest. There were 7 individuals who were at least initially involved in the primary. 5 finished the primary process, and I was selected from among the 5.
Congratulations. And I believe the last nominee for 2020 got around 40,000 votes. So some people will say third parties, they can't attract many votes, but it seems like the American Solidarity Party is actually growing. Say, I didn't hear about it the last election cycle, but I heard about it plenty of times for this election. So we're coming down really to the last couple months in this presidential cycle. What are some of the things that you are focused on in the next couple months to better your chances of winning this election?
Well, Michael, I think the primary area of focus for any third party is securing ballot access. And that is very simply trying to become a printed option on each state's ballot. Each state has different restrictions or different procedures, perhaps, to be more friendly about it, in going about securing that listing as one of the options among all. But it's been very challenging. In most cases, it's a requirement of securing a number of signatures from the state, from registered voters within the state. And many states have very onerous requirements. A state, for example, like Michigan requires 40,000 signatures. My own home state of Connecticut is on the order of 12,000. And the struggle with this, Michael, is that not only do you need to secure that many signatures, but you often need to secure 25, 30% more simply because a number of these signatures are ultimately invalidated. Oh, I can't read the signature, or, oh, this person, is not found in our voter rolls. Well, perhaps the person relocated to another address, and so for that reason, they have an old address on file, and it's been a constant challenge. I don't mean to co-opt your program here to complain about the system, but let's be honest. As Americans, I believe that we should have an opportunity to make viable candidates available options to the electorate. I understand that there should be some effort involved with securing that. We do need to have some method to ensure that not every Tom, Dick, and Harry who just wants to say, hey, I'm running for president, is able to secure the ballot position and to monopolize people's time in doing so. But I think we could be a little bit more generous in the method in which we screen.
Yeah, and so just election, all of the problems with voting, or say all of the parties, there's almost a two-party monopoly in America, and lots of other problems as well. But what do you think the biggest problem in American politics is today?
Are you referring to the political system, Michael, or are you referring to, moreover, just issues that face the United States in 2024?
Yeah, let's do both. We can start out with the political system, however.
Well, the political system, as you suggest, is a two-party system, a duopoly. It's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and that has evolved through the history of the United States. The limits with the two-party system are that it's black or white, left or right, red or blue, and it's very often nothing in between. The problem is that most Americans have places that they identify with one or the other party on certain issues, but they can't have what they think is um, a full complement of those values represented, because the two parties essentially work to limit competition. If there's one thing that Republicans and Democrats agree upon, it's keeping others out of the race. If the Republicans are up, say, 52-48 this year, and the Democrats are able to claim victory with 51-49, that, they only needed to move the needle very slightly in order to regain control. And then they can undo everything that the other guys did and do everything that they want to do, because they have the majority. What I'd like to see is a system that's similar to many other nations around the world, including many European nations, and that is to have an opportunity for other parties to be involved, for other parties that represent different values or different sets of values. And it may mean that nobody is able to obtain a majority in the United States, and they would need to form coalitions in order to secure the leadership that they desire. It works effectively elsewhere, and I suggest that it could work effectively in the United States as well.
Yeah, and I think that collaboration could be great. You don't see many politicians collaborating nowadays, especially in today's vitriolic climate. And before we go to the other question about what are the problems facing society, the people themselves, I did want to ask you, have you faced a lot of, say, criticism for being a third party candidate? It's almost like a lot of people just look down on the third party candidates because they believe that they're taking votes away from either side, either of the main two parties. Has that come up a lot just in your interactions with people?
It has. I would say that it's not always regarded as criticism, although I acknowledge that individuals who want very desperately to see a certain outcome, for example, they want desperately to see Donald Trump elected, or they want desperately to see Kamala Harris defeated, feel very strongly that you must vote one way. You must either reject one or support the other, and those are the only two options. A lot of people are perplexed. A lot of people don't feel very strongly about either of these candidates or either of the platforms that the two major parties are offering. So they hold their nose and they go in and they vote for what? The proverbial lesser of two evils. I'd like to be the greater good. I'd like to be an option for voters that can feel as though I'm voting for my conscience this year. I'm voting for values in which I believe this year. I'm voting in a way that allows me to come out and smile and feel like I stood for something instead of stood against something. I realize that the likelihood of my prevailing in November is very slight, but I still believe that we can vote morally for a set of values that represent who we are and what we desire for America. And if people feel as though they have a moral conviction to defeat a certain candidate and platform, they'll vote differently. But Michael, in my estimation, there are only a little more than a handful of states in the United States that we can determine, or we can estimate are going to cause this election to go in one or the other direction. In most states, my own, for example, a heavily blue state, voting for either one of the two candidates, a single vote for either one of the two candidates, is going to do very little in the way of changing the outcome in my state. So registering a vote for a third-party candidate is a clear way to say, I don't agree. I don't share your outlook. I want something else.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think we've been stuck in this cycle, us Christians, us Catholics, that we've been voting for the lesser evil for so long that even, say, the Republican Party has changed their agenda to, say, backtrack on issues such as abortion or the sanctity of human life. They're going further left, and we're losing our voice in politics. And so I think having a Catholic candidate representing us Catholics is able to at least give us some power in politics, give us a voice again. And so I'll ask you one question about just why Christians or Catholics should vote for you. Why you in particular, rather than Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
Well, I'd like to distinguish that I am a Catholic. I acknowledge that, and the values that I'm representing are certainly informed by my understanding of Catholic teaching. But I also acknowledge that our nation is not exclusively Catholic or Christian, and that the values that I offer are values that are for the common good. They're for every person. And so I don't want to be simply the candidate of individuals who identify as Catholic or Christian. And I certainly, were I elected, would not be only representing that swath of the electorate. But I think that what the Catholic Church has taught, Michael, for more than 100 years, beginning actually all the way back into the 19th century with the document Rerum Novarum by Pope Leo XIII, is a series of developments about the Christian outlook for the welfare of the total society. So Catholic means universal. So we're looking at the entire world, and we're looking at it through that Catholic and Christian lens, that understanding and internalization of the gospel. And so the views that I have and the views that I offer through the platform of the American Solidarity Party are filtered through that lens, but I think they're very valuable for everyone. The first and foremost is the respect for all human life. And when I say all human life, I mean from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. We need to respect and revere human life. And in so many examples in modern society, and sadly, in so many examples in the major party platforms, human life is not respected.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really the defining issue just in all elections nowadays. You have to be people first rather than, say, Republican first or even America first. You have to be people first.
We'll start with this premise, if I may. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think a lot of people think about this. I studied a lot of philosophy in school, so forgive me if I get a little thoughtful at times. But every piece of public policy that we enact, every law that we pass, should be directed at the good of human beings. Whether it's environmental policy and wanting clean air and clean water and beautiful lush forests and a minimization of pollution, whether it's education policy and wanting to give our learners the best possible instruction and opportunity to grow and become productive and thrive in their lifetime, or whether it's healthcare, whether it's international relations, whether it's interstate commerce, whether it's defense policy, everything should be directed at the fact that this is benefiting in some way human beings, and hopefully benefiting them as a society. And so if we start with that premise, we then immediately realize that respecting human life should be the foundation of everything that we believe.
Yeah, and building off that, what do you think is special about America? Really, the American story? What separates America from other countries around the world? Why are we still the shining city on a hill?
Well, America, as you know from history, is an amalgamation of so many different cultures and ethnicities, people from all walks of life, from all nationalities and experiences. And we've come together and learned that we can respect one another and also work toward a common value, a common strength and outcome that benefits us as a society. That's been very evident over our 2.5 century existence as a nation. We have developed very strong educational systems here. We've produced a number of very well-educated and productive people that have benefited not just our nation, but the world. And so we have much to be proud of. But there are also instances where I think we have become very self-confident and very comfortable in our own ability, in our own mental capacities, and perhaps have sought too much for ourselves as individuals, or forgotten that we are created and that we owe so much to our Creator in our own abilities. So that there is a measure of humility that always needs to temper all that we do. And perhaps that's not as evident as it ought to be for our nation to continue to be strong. In the political realm, Michael, we see this. We see loggerheads. We see disagreement. We see an unwillingness to do what you alluded to shortly ago, which is to reach across the aisle and to try to find compromise, to dialogue, to seek to understand different points of view, and to look for areas of common ground. That seems to be lost. And I don't think that it's irretrievable, but I do think it is trending in a bad direction.
Yeah, and so why did you in particular, so you, Peter, why did you want to run for president to, I would assume, to fix some of these issues, to add some healing to America?
Because, Michael, I have a loose wire. And I say that jokingly, but let's be honest. Taking on the task of running for any elected office, let alone President of the United States, means somebody has to have a little bit of something amiss, because they are willing to do something that is outside of the realm of likely success. But I've said before in other interviews, if not me, then who? And it's not just a question that I suggest that I ask myself. It's a question that I suggest everyone ask. I encourage that of my children, and I would encourage it of you and anyone who is viewing or listening. If not me, then who? I have to look at the status of society and say, is there something I can do? Maybe I can do something that's a small measure and predictably very successful. Maybe I can do something that is a very large measure and maybe not completely successful, but at least moves the bar somehow. At least gets us closer to an outcome that is desirable. So my desire to do this was simply to say, look, I'm at a stage in my life and I'm at a level of commitment that I felt I could say, this is an undertaking that I am willing to do, and I think America needs it. I think they need to be challenged to consider, is the Democratic platform the the fulfillment of truth is the Republican platform, the totality of truth? Or are there elements that might be selected from each and combined with still more that become a better choice for America? I found that in the ASP. I hope others who have not discovered the American Solidarity Party as yet will discover it too, or at least find still more than they find in either of those other two major parties or other of the periphery third parties. But the reality is, our system has become more and more limiting. It used to be, Michael, when I was a younger voter, that the two major parties would bend toward the middle in a presidential election. They would try to at least appeal to a larger number of voters, or maybe, if I'm not saying larger, at least a large number of uncommitted voters in the center as a way to win the presidential election, and then perhaps the influence of that help them in congressional elections, all the down ballot elections, if you will. I don't think that happens anymore. I don't think the two parties bend toward the middle. They bend toward the polar extremes. And as a result of that, they're ripping the nation further apart. There's more division, there's more anger, there's more disagreement than I can remember in a long period of time. We came to war, sadly, 150 plus years ago because of this type of activity. And I don't think that we're trending in that direction, but I don't like the division, the animosity, the disagreement that exists. It's not productive.
Yes, it's getting terrible, getting almost to a breaking point of something. And so, to go back a few years, how did you first discover this American Solidarity Party, and what attracted you to their platform, to their beliefs?
Well, let me preface it by saying that I was both a Democrat and a Republican in my voting lifetime. When I graduated high school and was able to become eligible as a voter, I registered as a Democrat. I grew up in a blue household. Mom and dad were both from blue collar families. Both of their families worked in manufacturing backgrounds. Dad was a World War II veteran. I have a grandfather who was a World War I veteran, a great grandfather who was a Spanish-American War veteran. So there was always a very strong affinity, at least in that era, the Kennedy era, of social responsibility and what I would call reasonably solid representation by the Democratic Party for social values. That changed shortly after I became a registered voter, and it started to go in an opposite direction. Ronald Reagan was the Republican. He was a former Democrat, became a Republican, and the Republican nominee, and really began to coalesce socially conservative voters into the Republican Party. And then the two parties more or less started to diverge even more. I was at first a Reagan Democrat, and then later a Reagan Republican. I remained a Republican for a time after his 2 terms came to an end, but I just couldn't feel at home in the Republican Party. So for more than 2 decades, I was an unaffiliated voter and just wandering, just homeless politically. I was introduced, as I said, in 2018 to the American Solidarity Party. I had voted third party, you'll recall, in 2016. And just a Catholic friend who had already discovered the ASP was conversing with me and said, "Hey, let me tell you about the American Solidarity Party." He showed me the platform, and Michael, it fit me like a glove. Everything that I respected in the way of social values and everything that I felt was being given short shrift by the other party. If they valued some things that I valued, they would either diminish or oppose flatly some of the other values that I had. But here, they were all combined. They were all unified. And I thought, where have you been all my life?
Yeah, and so to go back to that one question I was going to ask you at the very start of this, we might have answered it actually, but what is the biggest problem facing the American public? What should people be concerned about most?
Well, we've been talking about that division. We've been talking about the differences that exist. And I don't think that's healthy for a nation. I don't think that we're going to stand strong if we continue to be divided. But I would hope very much that we could come to a greater understanding and a greater respect for human life, especially human life in the womb. We're watching our neighbors to the north, and they are beginning to disregard human life that is either aged or infirm. They're advancing what they call MAID, doctor-assisted suicide aid in dying, medical assistance in dying, I believe is the acronym. And we need to respect life, as I said earlier, from womb to tomb. And the farther that we edge toward an embrace or an acceptance of devaluing life in the womb or devaluing the aged and the infirm, the more it becomes easy for us to devalue other human life, whether it's healthy and it just is not in agreement with us, whether it has a different color skin or a different ethnicity or a different political perspective. It seems as though we can begin to say, you are worthless to me. So we need to be able to develop a better respect for all human life, all points of view, and as a result, become more unified, more welcoming and understanding of each other, and a stronger nation as a result.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. And so just two more questions here. I think these are good questions. Just your personal reaction to the current political drama, like say since the debate between Biden and Trump. I think that was the end of June. Then we had the assassination attempt on Trump,
Mm-hmm.
and we can leave it there. Like, what has been your reaction to say that assassination attempt, which I think really made incarnate a lot of the political division?
Sure. I condemned the assassination attempt. Again, this is devaluing human life. I don't agree with this person or the way he acts or his point of view, and so I'm going to eliminate it. I want nothing to do with it, and because it's personally inconvenient, I'm going to seek to uh, get it out of my life. And that's what that mentality that I spoke of before leads to. So I condemn that. I condemn the individual attack on President Trump, and I condemn all violence, political violence and otherwise. It's terribly wrong. The debate between President Biden and former President Trump was a huge disappointment. I watched and I saw President Biden stumble as often as he did, and it caused me grave worry, as it did the majority of America. This is not a person that gave me the confidence that he has the ability to lead the nation minute by minute. And President Trump was pretty standard from what I had experienced before. Maybe maybe he was giving more time and more space to President Biden because he sensed that the president was having as much difficulty as he seemed to be having that evening. But his answers were the same style, and his method of answering was the same style that I have come to know and really found wanting. So I think that, again, as we've alluded to, there's many people in America that feel as though the options before them, and even with Vice President Harris as the Democratic nominee, the policies that she represents and the values that she has personally exemplified seem contrary to what I've been discussing and what are important to me, and I sense that are the values of most Americans, especially most Catholic and Christian Americans.
Yeah, for sure. And so you mentioned just political violence, and that's something that you running for president inevitably face in some way. It might just be words or it might be physical violence. And so it's a very hard thing to do, to actually run for president and put yourself up on a pedestal like that. And so what has been really all of the emotional, all of the reaction yourself just to this this presidential nominee season, you running for president? How has this affected you as a man?
Well, first of all, thank you for acknowledging that, Michael. I think of the many interviews that I have offered, there's been very few people that have had that insight. It is challenging, and I'm not looking for sympathy when I say that, but the and it's not so much the opposition, because look, my points of view are my points of view. They'll differ with others, and if I wasn't prepared to counter other people's positions, then I had no business being in the race. And if I am not able to fend off people's opposition and criticism, then I had no business to be in the race. But the larger issue is that you are constantly in need of being personally aware that your words, your behavior, and the manner in which you represent yourself and the platform, the positions that you're standing for, in my case, the American Solidarity, are how all of that will be measured. I am a person of prayer. I need to be a person of even more intense prayer during this campaign. Especially, I've asked people, please pray for me, and pray in particular for humility and wisdom, so that I never imagine myself being bigger than the issues or bigger than the task by virtue of being a presidential nominee, not inflated. And also just an ability to be able to see and understand things in the right way, not necessarily in my way, but if somebody has a point of opposition, I would like to understand the experience that that individual or that group has to offer, and perhaps it's something that I haven't experienced personally, and for that reason have perhaps been either ignorant of or dismissive, because we're a large nation and we're a nation of many different experiences and many different ideas, but we are all human beings. We are all made in the image and likeness of God, and I believe that we all have certain values that will benefit us. And I hope I'm doing my best to represent those values, as I said earlier, for the common good.
Now, that is a fascinating answer, and I definitely relate to it a lot as a school teacher. But as we come to the end of things here, to conclude, I'll just leave the floor to you to make a pitch to potential voters, to everyone that listens to this. Why are you someone that they should vote for?
As I said earlier, running for, let's put it this way. When we go into the voting booth, I hope that we are guided by a set of interior values and principles, and that we are not necessarily guided simply by an identity with a particular political affiliation. I need to go in and vote Democrat. Mom and dad were Democrats, and I voted Democrat my entire life. I don't necessarily agree with them on the life issues, but I've got to support them because I can't allow Donald Trump to be reelected and become a tyrant or whatever. I've heard it all. I think that we as voters in forming ourselves, in concluding how we are to vote, should vote based on a set of principles and values that are innate in us and tell us that this is what I represent, this is what I desire for our nation. If that's the case, and if that is, and if I and the I as a candidate, the American Solidarity Party as a political movement represent those values, then I would ask you, please support us. I don't expect to be changing my address in January of 2025. I hope that I haven't indicated that I am with enough support and enough ballot access to imagine that becoming reality. It's not out of the realm of the possibility, but it is a long shot. But what is within the realm of possibility, what is likely, is that we can have influence. We can say, look at the number of people that voted for this party and this individual. What did they represent that caused those votes to go that way? What are we deficient in, and why can't we bring them into our party? Do we need to make changes to our party? What else is out there that's valuable and that is desirable for them? As I said earlier, the two-party system is a system, but it is not the only system. And we can effectively introduce different points of view, different values, different stances, if we have more people who are welcome to the party.
That's a great answer as well. A great note to end the show on. But I invite everyone, if they don't vote for you, to at least pray for you. I think you're a man who definitely needs all of our prayer. I'll keep you in my prayers as well. And I thank you really for all of your service and your dedication to making America a better place. And so thanks again for coming on the show. I think it was a great episode. So any last words?
No, Michael, God bless you. God bless your audience. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about my background and my ambitions.
All right. Thank you. And thanks everyone for watching. May God bless you.
Like the eternal city that is Rome.